This one's called Fire Department. Where is your village burning? Where is your village mined fields? Where is your village blasted in crossfire, wounded under jungle trees? Where is your village running across marshes, shot in the back? Where is your village waving white flags, frisked, registered, supervised in a camp? Where is your village blowing up army friskers, other villages? Where is your village? Toronto, Berlin, Tamil Nadu. Where is your village? Madagascar as option has not been discussed. Where is your village? Stella Vista, special envoy. Where is your village? Burning. You know, Madagascar, I don't know if you remember in the history of Zionism, Madagascar was considered once a place where Israel could be founded, you know, and it ended up being founded again in modern day Israel. But so the notion of Madagascar, a place for the Tamils, a place where they can go and set up their own nation, because it's denied them in the island space called Sri Lanka. Sculpture in memoriam. I have not learned how to use a gun, though I could live out the line. I have not learned how to use a gun. Thought I could live out the line in my hand without recourse to suicide or murder, which would hurt family and friends and leave unsettling questions for the literary executor. How to classify making verses beyond the border, unhinged, crossing over with Meinhof or Resnikov, deciding to stop writing for 5 years. Though Socrates kept mind limber, acquiring a new language in the days before he took hemlock. But contradictions visit once more near my home in Vancouver. A poet named Stuart, once the great hope of the city, now resigned to an SRO on the east side. As I gather shrapnel up from various news reports to make a sculpture to send to an imaginary museum to be built on the land bridge between Tamil Nadu and Talaimana, the one where Hanuman's monkey army formed a chain Rama rode over to rescue his Sita. What a silly story. Sita lives in Toronto now, and Rama burned himself to death in Geneva. Don't know if you know the story of Rama and Sita, you know, and Ravana. Ravana steals Sita and brings her over to Lanka. And Rama, with the help of Hanuman and his monkey army, they build a bridge from India to Lanka and Rama rescues his wife Sita and brings her back to India. But you know, so in this modern concept for me of this Tamils, you know, it becomes a silly story. Sita is now living in Toronto in exile, a migrant of the war. And Rama has committed suicide in Geneva because there were Tamils in Geneva, one in Geneva, some in Tamil Nadu who burnt themselves, you know, out of despair or to protest this conflict and kill themselves. So yes, there are difficult subjects touched in this book, but not all are necessarily catharsis. I mean, there's also, I'm trying to write a history in poetry of this conflict, and the book starts a section called Before, then War, and then After. My father, I mentioned earlier, and his poetry is just important, and when he passed away, he died actually in church, waiting for communion at the St. Jude's Church in Rockville, Maryland. Here in Honolulu, we used to go to Star of the Sea Church out in Wailea. And Father, so here's the poem that I wrote literally after hearing the book, and then taking the plane back to, in that case, to Rockville, and for the funeral. Father, geese honked on their way to the other side of the sky. Rain and wind teamed up cold and befogged the neighborhood the day my father died. The day my father died, my brother sang a lullaby to accompany him on his journey up high, to that territory where my son says he will teach poetry, where I say poems will fry like butter and geyser out of the hole in the center of space, as if from molten rock, my son, out of entrails of carcasses still fleshed, from trees ripe with vines, conceived in death, hammered from memory. Here are belts and hides, impressed, distilled, etched on buckles and holsters, ola-leafed images, parchments, poems to survive the fires. He has left us his name. We wear it today, and metaphors that curdle and whirl through our consciousness, each one at its own pace, in nature's slow dying, in its corybantic profusion. My Father, you have given us the saving cup, and voiced us from the wilderness, and caught the undertow of sadness which rocks what fleeting gladness there is today, or may once have been. Now that you've seen the vision that enlightened your face and suffused it smiling in the moment of death by the altar of the Blessed Sacrament in this St. Jude Church, now you can tell us quietly in dreams as we stumble into morning and break our bread that awesome secret which led us out of the island and into a history where a turn of the head does not make salt, and you do not expire in gunfire or necklaced with a tire, where you can make peace with God and guide your children, adore your grandchildren, love your countries, all the countries woken up by your voracious reading as boy and man, the countries from which all travellers return, the day their fathers died, laden with gifts, the day our fathers die, awesome secrets, the day our fathers die, ambrosia bliss, the day rasa, the day guy, the day our father died. He was Guy Amirthanayagam, so, and he used to be known as a child as Rasa, which we in Tamil is Prince, and so the day Rasa, the day Guy, the day our father died, just fell easily, that rhyme with the I'll read one more poem from Civil War, and this one's called Happiness Blues, Sri Lanka. I don't know what to say, my friend. I have some blues that don't seem right, too light and fancy-free, happiness and all that putty you poke and pat, grinning silly. But love is the matter with me. I have plenty, and I want to start sharing the bounty. How lucky can a man be, used to melancholy and raving at the moon about family buried by the lagoon, who will catch the drift along with snowflakes in this far northern and European town, that tried to make peace back in the viper-ridden valley and failed, yet somehow miraculously cousins survived and are making their way out of the jungle, heads held high. And throughout the planet, family is saying this effort to settle foundation stones of our piece of earth will continue until the end of time. So nobody should rest on laurels or dream of bitter death. Happiness has me up tonight, generous and lively. Are you ready for a roll? A reading about uncivil fools who think blood can be washed away, bones buried in the sand, that everybody will forget how one hand clapped and white vans set off to prowl. No, my friends, this happiness will not be shoveled into the back seat or stuffed with cloth down its throat or peppered in the eyeballs. It will not expire before midnight. We are about to play, the crowd is eager and shouting, a post-midnight set, happiness blues, after the reckoning, the counting of the dead. Now, would any of you like to hear one of my poems in Spanish?
Yes.
Okay. Just for the sounds. This one's called. Go ahead.
Yo.
Okay. Te voy a dedicar este poema a ti. That means I'm going to dedicate this poem. Tentación. Me sentaré en tus ojos hasta que me mires. No tengo otro proyecto, puedo quedarme años y horas. He dejado a otros la prosecución de la guerra, la competencia para que todos se sientan agobiados o muertos. Estoy fresco como una limonada, me visto en ropa casi del aire, me pongo el maquillaje de los salones de Francia, no tengo nada que hacer sino darte gozo, soy tu serviente, mis hombros, mis manos, mis caderas están pulidos para que puedas resbalar sobre ellos. ¿Por qué cruzas las fronteras? ¿Por qué no me miras? And so I'm literally saying at the beginning of that poem, I will sit down in your eyes until you look at me. Me sentaré en tus ojos hasta que me miro. I have no other project, nothing else to do. No tengo otro proyecto. Puedo quedarme años y horas. I can stay for hours or days. So it's a very romantic poem. But it's also again a poem which has a political theme in the sense of, I say in the poem, he dejado otros la prosecución de la guerra, la competencia para que todos se sientan agobiados o muertos. I have left to others sort of the prosecution of the war, the competition, so that everyone will feel either exhausted or dead. I mean, that's a sort of a literal translation of what. So, you know, it's just an obsession, a theme in my poetry of the personal, the intimate, the relationship in the context of a social, political conflict, and just this notion that kingdoms can come and go. I think now is a good time to recite So Beautiful, which you heard the other night, and you know, and not everyone here knows, and it's just. But again, it's a poem that has been popular with for me, and people have liked. But it's also a poem that again picks up on this theme of the personal, the intimate, and the context of it, and as being what's important. I wrote it in New York many years ago, one Saturday night, and it goes like this. So beautiful that couple, in handsome black and red clothes, walking along the street, her arms folded, his in pockets cold, scarves loosely wrapped about white necks. And in the subway car, a black man takes a black woman's hands, and her eyes look far away beyond the walls, under the sea, and his eyes concentrate on her hands as glasses drop slightly down his nose, as she turns and smiles, as he looks up at clay made whole. And she takes her hands about his cheeks, makes a vase, and roses are put in his mouth and hair, and her brown leather coat crumples as she kisses him, and his black windbreaker is crumpled by her kiss. And for 2 subway stops their kiss moves a man to write and get up in the morning and sing an old song, to remember a woman in a dream who held his hands, wearing earrings of white moons, in black hair open as a fan, blowing honeyed wind about the room in which they loved and loved, as kingdoms came and went, in which they loved and loved, as the black man and woman left their embrace to slowly get up to the door by an old man in the window seat, into whose hands dropped 2 white moons. Thank you.